Right, hi guys. So back with the Grapplers Academy. We've got a real good match for you today. I'm excited to break this one down. So today's match, we've got Josh Barnett versus Dean Lister. Really good match when we were looking at it originally as an option to go through, and sitting down and evaluating the match, it got even more interesting. Si, what are your thoughts on it?
Yeah, like on the surface of it, like kind of expected it just to be a side control battle and not a great deal going on. And I remember watching it initially when earlier on in my sort of grappling training, my knowledge of the game wasn't really there, so it wasn't as entertaining back then before actually coming down to break down it critically like this.
Yeah, absolutely agree. I remember looking back at this match back when it was out in 2014, and I was just looking at it from the point of view of probably not an uneducated grappling fan, but certainly not with as much knowledge as I've got now. And it was, it's a bit of a dirty side control battle match. There just seems to be a lot of top heavy pressure there from Josh Barnett. He's a big guy. Not that Dean Lister's a small guy, but it just looked like a dirty grinding match for the most part. So going back over it now, 6 years later, with a bit more of an analytical approach of it, really interesting.
Oh, definitely. You can sort of see the sort of smaller details, the intricate details that are coming into it. And what I like as well, you can sort of see Josh Barnett's catch background coming a bit more into it, and it becomes a bit of a jiu-jitsu versus catch wrestler, as opposed to being a all-round grappling match.
Yeah, and to kind of dive into grappling versus jiu-jitsu, if you look at the track records building up to this match, if we maybe look at Dean Lister's first, absolute host of victories. You go on his Wikipedia page, and the wins that he's had is phenomenal. ADCC absolute champion, super fight champion. 2005, 2003, just absolutely ridiculous. And I think in the build up to this fight, something that is interesting that plays into his potential mindset in the match is 8 heel hook wins in a row.
And
he's going to be looking for leg locks.
100%. It's like this, and this was before leg locks, heel hooks were popular, so to say. And like it's sort of, you could argue that he was probably one of the first guys on the forefront of the leg lock trend at the moment. And certainly looking at his record, you can sort of see where that has come from.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, 2014, it's probably a couple of years right before that leg lock trend jumped in. And interestingly, listening to the commentary in this match, some of the commentary around the leg lock game that he's looking for is a bit interesting. They're just discussing about it as like the leg reaping position and all this sort of stuff, and just the terminology used versus what's used today, and the more technical terminology and use of the game is definitely there from the majority of players. Like famously from the John Danaher podcast with Joe Rogan, like he's got that famous quote, "Why would you ignore 50% of the human body?"
No, 100%, yeah.
He's definitely playing it to his advantage. Anything else you want to add in about Dean Lister there before we start talking about Josh a bit?
Nothing that it's not really been said, really. Like you said, he's got a whole host of great victories and great names and great titles. Like the win to loss ratio in his record leading up to it was very, very favourable for him coming into this. I'd probably argue that he's probably the favourite for the match.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's interesting as well listening to the commentary in the match when we get into it, or when you guys go and look at the commentary on the match for yourself. The crowd are heavily favouring Dean Lister. Jeff Glover's commentating on the match. Obviously a training partner and somebody who works down at Victory MMA with him. But yeah, they are expecting Dean Lister to come in and win this match and probably win it by a heel hook.
100%. And I think what sort of played in nicely with it as well was Josh Barnett sort of inquiring about you wearing his wrestling boots for the match. As when they were coming up to this and leading into it, were sort of like there was no rules against it. And I think they were kind of hoping that, or coming into the mindset that him wearing wrestling boots going to play into Dean Lister's favour. and didn't really think about the other end of the spectrum, why Josh Barnett might want to wear them.
Yeah, so if you guys haven't seen this match already, Josh Barnett's got some really interesting choice of attire that you'll see when we get into the match in a minute. And wrestling boots is just, I would say, the start of that interesting attire. Probably got a few funny looks from the crowd. I might start introducing that into my own grappling game as a distraction tactic.
100%. It's kind of like you wake up in the middle of the night and go down to the fridge to get some food. It's sort of like the kind of attire that you'd wear for that.
Yeah, you go down, it's quarantine, you're on lockdown, and you go into the kitchen, you're looking for that snack that you just saved a little bit of from dinner, and somebody's already raided it. They're in the fridge, like finishing off that last bit of the brownie, and this is when it goes down. That's when you want your cat's wrestling underpants on.
Oh, 100%.
And just another really interesting side note on the build-up to this match, Dean Lister had not lost a match by submission leading up to this match. So yeah. He had a couple of losses to points only. 2 previous turnouts on the Metamoris card, but both of those ended up in draws. So, coming into this match, Dean Lister's pretty confident that he can get a submission even against a bigger guy. And well, we'll get into the match in a minute, and you guys, if you've not seen it already, will see how this goes down. For those guys who've not got a background on Josh Barnett, if you want to give us a bit of a breakdown on him.
Yeah, so Josh Barnett's background leading up to this is primarily a bit of an MMA background. So he'd not had a grappling match entirely, probably for about 14 years leading up to this match, with his last sort of professional grappling match being a loss at the ADCC, where, like I said, 14 years off the mats for a grappling focus and focusing on an MMA career. Again, you can argue that a purist grappler should come through and essentially win this match and come in there as a favourite. But looking at his MMA credentials leading up to this, Barnett's record was very, very favourable. Like, he ended his career with 35 wins and 8 losses. And those 8 losses were to some very, very strong contenders. One of them being former UFC heavyweight champion Daniel Cormier. But yeah, leading up to 2014, he'd had a number of fairly good wins, with his last win before the match against Dean Lister was against grappling sort of prodigy again, Frank Mir, and he was coming off a loss coming into this match about 8 months prior, which was a KO, which might have played into the decision for having a grappling focused match. But again, really, really, all the records and everything leading up to this fight really puts Dean Lister as the favourite for winning this.
Yeah, and just to counter that, his credentials in MMA are there to be seen. Losses against 3 losses against Mirko Cro Cop, which, I mean, come on, you can let anybody slide on that. But when you look at his wins, he's no stranger to submissions, a lot of head and arm triangles, a lot of kimuras. He's got a good submission game. He's no stranger to getting the win by submission. Of course, TKOs and KO finishes, but he's got his own heel hooks. He's a catch wrestler, toe holds. It's nothing new to him. So the other end of the spectrum, from Dean Lister's point of view, he's fighting a catch wrestler who's a bigger guy. He's no stranger to the leg lock game, and maybe taking a slightly different approach to what we'll see in a minute when we start the match may have been a better idea.
Oh, definitely. So should we get straight into the first sort of point of the match that we sort of really helped decide the odds for the winner?
Yeah,
so we're leading up to sort of this point that we're going to start discussing in a minute. Dean Lister kind of approached the match where he's took his grips, moved around a little bit, and then tried to pull guard directly underneath Josh Barnett. And Barnett sort of sat back a little bit heavy on his hips, most likely to avoid Dean Lister being able to get underneath and start attacking his legs. Anything you want to add into there?
Yeah, he does a really good job of keeping his weight distribution back a couple of times up to the point where we're at in the match now on the match clock being at 7 minutes 28, 17 minutes 28, sorry. He's down on his knees, keeping his hips back. He's doing a really good job of controlling Dean Lister's ankle. He's also holding at the toe and just not letting Dean get underneath him. Dean Lister wants to pull guard, use those butterfly hooks and leg entanglements to get underneath to start disturbing his balance. And Josh Barnett up to this point is having absolutely none of it and doing a great job of staying out of that. And also, just before we move on, if this is anybody's first opportunity to look at that beautiful set of catch wrestling attire that he's got on, let's just take a moment to appreciate that. The referees appreciating that as well.
Oh, you could definitely see is that Chris Hoyter there is his hands on his hips, looking quite impressed with it, isn't
he? Yeah, he's interested in what's about to happen.
So what we're going to do with this now, we're going to sort of play the sequence, and me and Bon are going to sort of talk over what we're seeing and what's happening. So I'm just going to hit the play button, and we can sort of see here Josh Barnett's entering in. As you can see here, he's starting to control his hips, he's controlling the knee, and he's stuffing our Dean Lister's movement, stopping him from getting underneath him and starting to attack his legs. And he finds the pass here.
He does a beautiful job there of controlling the hips and using that to steer Dean Lister to a side control position. And if we just pause that there a second, really interesting point just to break down. Anybody who listened to the last breakdown that we did, Marcelo Garcia and Cron Gracie, we talked a lot about framing in side control. So if we're making a frame between the elbow and the knee and the guy underneath on side control, we're trying to limit the top guy's ability to get his hips in and really start applying that pressure. And Dean starts off doing a good job with this. He's got his elbow and his knee in underneath. It's across Josh Barnett's stomach. But once he's past here, Josh from the top does a really good job of smearing that pressure up and starts to ride down on the forearm until he's able to pass his hip down past the line of the knee. And then from that point there, it's just a matter of time and small adjustments to get in and finish the side control. So you can see there in that sequence when we just play through it, he's going to drop his right hip up, slide it down the forearm, and then able to get it in. And now he's got a full lock-in on that side control there with some nasty pressure.
Yeah, I think another key thing to take away from here is this immediate adjustment once he gets past this knee, is he sends his back leg that little bit further back to solidify his base, and it allows him to really torque his hips into Dean Lister to help secure the pin there, really. And
another quick point, just before we move on here, Simon discussed this the other day, and if we look at what's going on in the head, in the top part of the movement around the shoulders as well, he's grabbing the crown of Dean Lister's head rather than completely smushing it in. So he's torquing his head in that direction while he's trying to drive his hips in, and you can see where those wrestling boots are really coming into play now on this canvas mat. There's a lot of friction there, and as Simon's just rightly saying, he's driving. He's able to drive a lot of that weight in with the friction that he's got on the positioning that he's producing.
Oh, definitely, and I think following on from that bit there, Josh Barnett does go on to get the cradle on the far side of Dean Lister, which again is a great control point from the top side control. And going back to the wrestling boots, sort of as we mentioned earlier, the community was sort of thinking that it's great letting Josh Barnett have the wrestling boots because it makes his feet a bigger target. But as soon as this match was over with, the sort of headlines changed a little bit, and they were saying that Josh Barnett shouldn't have been allowed to use his wrestling boots because he was using it to apply more pressure. Now, for me, the rule book didn't have anything against it, so you can't change your mindset and your rules after the fact has happened. Sort of like pick your side and just sort of sit on it and be like, it's okay with it. He's used his tools properly for it.
Yeah, I mean, if we look at that, Metamoris has had a couple of issues like this as well in the past where people have complained. Particularly, you can look at the Eddie Bravo and the Eddie Bravo match where he's got the gi pants on. That's going to help him a lot there. So, Metamoris, The name's gone blank now. Metamoris. Hasn't had a show in quite a while, but it was an interesting show to watch because of some of those elements where there was a bit of a mismatch in the matchups and some slightly different rule changes that don't apply to other grappling events.
Yeah, definitely. What I did like though is they kind of, if there was a misrepresentation of the rules and it was a bit of a what's the word now? Misjustice. Sorry, I've lost my point now. But
injustice.
That's the word, injustice. Where
there we go.
They sort of corrected it for the following shows. So they were quick to sort of fix the rule sets. But like I said, don't complain after the fact. Just go with it and then amend it going forward. So anything you want to sort of add to this sequence of the pass, Bon? Because we sort of, throughout the match, Josh Barnett kind of did use the same principles here when he was passing Dean Lister's guard. Because he was a lot of the knee control, a lot of the far hip control. And one thing I noticed a lot of is this elbow control here on Dean Lister's hip. So you can see where the hand is hooking round onto Lister's hip, but he's also using his elbow to control the near side hip and sort of slow down those explosive bridges that could disrupt his base. And there's he used a lot of these principles here now for passing Dean's guard, a lot of hip and knee control to then progress and solidify his position.
Yeah, absolutely. When he's actually past the legs and he comes into a side control position, he does a phenomenal job of keeping Dean on his back. Here in this position is a perfect example. That pressure he's got in on the hips and the head. Dean has got no choice but to stay on his back. He's not letting him get his hips out. He's got pressure on him in both directions, pressing into him, but also pulling into him as well. So just making it really difficult for Dean to make any advancement, get his frames in and make an attempt at regarding. So we can carry on through this sequence and look at how this plays out. So again, just great pressure from the top there, doing a good job of keeping Dean flat on his back, using the hooks. And again, using a lot of pressure from the top on the knees.
Oh, definitely. I was going to sort of pause here a little bit. Now, one thing I observed as well from watching this is Barnett's knees are very rarely on the mat. They're on the mat here on this pause part, but for the majority of the match, while he's on top of Dean Lister, the only thing that's on the floor tends to be his toes. And again, that just adds to the amount of pressure that he's able to drive through and deliver into essentially Dean's ribcage, affecting his breathing, affecting his ability to escape, and then just over time wearing him down and sort of trying to grind him out for that submission.
Yeah, some people call that cooking your opponent, tiring them out, emptying the gas tank before you eventually do end up going on to either advanced position or look for a submission. It's a really effective tactic. I like to use it a lot. If I can get a top control position, just kind of wear them out a little bit, tie them down, force them into making a mistake rather than looking for anything or forcing anything yourself from the top.
No, definitely. So should we find another example of Barnett using his pressure here to control Dean Lister?
Yep.
So another example of Barnett's heavy pressure on Lister. Say it's a common theme throughout the whole of this match, but you can sort of see here where he's got him in turtle position and Lister's really trying to get out of here. Really, Barnett's not a man you want to be underneath, and you want to try and get back to your comfort zone. And you can see Lister's trying to get back to his guard and trying to play that open guard game to possibly even try and get into the leg lock attacks. But I think Barnett's pressure here is just absolutely I think it's a great example of the pressure and controlling where the fight goes from using that constant pressure. Anything you want to add into that?
The pressure is great from the top. He's controlling the hands. He's winning the hand fight. But the one thing that he's doing a lot of, and we'll probably see through this sequence as we go through, is he's doing like a shin ride. And what the shin ride's doing is stopping Dean Lister from escaping, regarding, or getting underneath him and start getting those leg entanglements. A bit later on in the match, Dean Lister manages to disturb Josh Barnett's balance, and he manages to almost get in underneath him for a leg entanglement. It's like his best opportunity of the match. But all before then, Josh Barnett from the top has got excellent shin ride control and just shutting that down from the top. We'll probably see him go into it in a minute, because what Dean's doing here is he's got his hips dropped back, because he's already experienced this shin ride position. So he knows he doesn't want his legs covered from the top. It's shutting him down massively. So at the moment, he's not got that control, but I think he uses a good bump forward with the knee and is able to get in on that shin ride again in a second. But there's a lot of good turtle play here as well. If it's not in this one, it might just be worth showing that as a quick example if it's not in this sequence, because that shin ride control is so good.
Yeah, what we'll come back and we'll find that. So you can sort of see that here, this shin ride position that Bonn was referring to. And not only is it a great control point, but if you've ever experienced it, it's not the most comfortable thing you want to have going on, especially around the ankle and around sort of the calf and that tendon area. It tends to be quite sensitive as it is.
Yeah, and we can see there he's got that shin ride, and he's also searching with that left hand. He's trying to pull Dean's arm in underneath him to try and make him an easier target to turn over or manipulate. The wider Dean's base is, the more potential for movement he's got. So he's trying to pull all that in, but that leg position is nasty. I've had that done to me a couple of times in the past, and whether I just need to foam roll my calves a little bit more, or get Jerry to bring his massage gun in on the situation. That might be another option, but this is not comfortable, especially from a big guy who's already at this point sweaty and wearing those wrestling boots. I wouldn't want to be in Dean's position at this point of the match.
Not at all. You can sort of see where the focus of the weight's kind of going as well. Like he's leaning all of his weight into it, and it's just nasty. But what we'll do, sorry, mate.
No, I was just saying, let's run back through that sequence.
Yeah, so we're going to run through the sequence here. You can sort of see where he uses hip pressure to control where Lister goes. So we're going to try and sort of invert underneath him and try and recover some sort of guard and get out of this position.
Yeah, at the moment, it looks like Dean wasn't really doing a lot there, but it's because Josh was shutting down a lot of his options. And that's probably the case for most of the match, to be honest. And now he's got a beautiful cradle position there. Lots of pressure, making it nice and tight. That is not comfortable either. I think a common theme for a lot of catch wrestling stuff is make the guy underneath as uncomfortable as possible.
Yeah, that's it. It's kind of like that mindset of, I'm going to apply pressure. I'm going to keep applying that pressure until you kind of concede to the position that I want to get to, instead of trying to sort of dance around and get to it in a nice way. It's sort of like, no, I'm going to get there, and you're going to be as miserable as possible until I get to where I want to be. Which, to be fair,
definitely an interesting spin on the gentle art.
Yeah, definitely. Well, what's the old saying goes? It's sort of like jiu-jitsu will find a way around it, whereas catch wrestling will smash its way through it. And to be fair, I quite like the mindset to be behind that, to be honest with you.
Yeah, I'll be honest as well. I think, both having come from an MMA background, I like this style of play. Like this is my style of jiu-jitsu that I like. I appreciate all the quick movement and the flowing in the movement, but this is the style of jiu-jitsu that I like. Control, pressure, make your opponent work for that escape. Don't give them anything.
No, you want to sort of make them accept defeat before you've actually decided to go for the submission. Your training partners might not like you for it, but there's sort of levels you can play with, where you've got the gym level and then you've got the competition level, and then you have a few partners where you can sort of go a little bit close to that competition level with. Yeah.
The better you like somebody, the nastier you're going to be to them.
Well, that's kind of the way it goes, doesn't it, in the combat sports? But I think what we noticed as well, Barnett's always trying to, throughout the whole of this match, he's trying to find that Kimura, isn't he, on the far side? He does a great job of trying to find it, and like from rolling with you quite a lot, this the Kimura sequence that he goes for, it's like you like to play the same kind of thing. And like I say, I can sort of appreciate the pressure and the isolation from the way that you've been the way that you work the sequence when I rode with you as well.
Yeah, one of my favourite positions to play from side control. If ever that opportunity is there to get the Kimura control, which I feel is a really strong controlling position, I'll always be looking for that. Even if it's just a transition to something else, it gives you a really good handle to grab onto your opponent with, and of course that finish is always a couple of seconds away. And good job you bring that up there, because it'll be really good to actually go and look at that if it isn't within this sequence right now. It'll be really interesting to go and see what Dean does to defend that, because he does actually a really good job of defending that Kimura attack. Josh Barnett tries it a good handful of times, at least 5 times, and Dean's able to get out of it every time.
Oh, definitely.
So be really interesting to look at that and see what's going on there.
Yeah, definitely. Let's line that up and we'll go through that sequence next.
So back in here with another really interesting point in the match, just jumping off where we were talking about that Kimura control sequence. So currently you can see that Dean's in it underneath on a side control position again. Now what Josh is doing really good, getting him to look for an escape, starts to get him to turn, and Dean starts to outreach those arms to try and grab on a single leg or try and recover and guard in some sort of way. So when we play through this now, we'll see that that outreaching of the arms gives Josh an opportunity to get in and get on that Kimura grip. So as Dean starts to turn away and begin to look for that single leg or start to recover, we can pause there and see that he gets that initial bite on a Kimura grip. Just we go back on that frame there. So throws that top arm in underneath the elbow and gets he's starting to now look for that double wrist control. So yeah, perfect. So we can see that top arm starting to swim in under the armpit. He's already got the wrist of Dean controlled, the one that's looking for the single leg. And then as we just roll through this sequence now, we'll see that Dean almost recovers for a second, but then Barnett's able to get back up on top and maintain that position from a strong control. So this is what I was talking about before here. It's always a good opportunity to look for this option from a side control. It's always readily available. People like to push and frame with their arms, and there's always an opportunity there to dive in on this.
And then he sort of continues the sequence again, doesn't he, with a similar sort of setup. Yep. But you can sort of see Josh Barnett's now in a better position to attack it on his own time and his own pace, as opposed to off a reaction of what Dean Lister's doing now.
Yeah, this is almost the perfect setup here. Dean Lister's completely on his side at the moment. Josh has got his legs pinched on either side of his torso. We see that Dean's got a good interlocked arm position, which is going to slow down that attack for a second, but there's always a finish there. That grip, whether, doesn't matter how strong it is, we can always break that grip, or there's always a couple of other options from this position, like a head scissor, or I've even been playing around with a couple of different inverted triangle positions on this recently, which seem to be working well as well, which me and Simon have been having a play around with the concept of that. But yeah, from here, he's got a real good, strong position to start off with. And regardless of whether Dean's got his arms tied up there, there's the potential to finish this. So as we go through this sequence, we'll see how we adjust his position. And Dean's doing a really good job of defending it. He manages to get that bottom arm pinned, which takes away the ability for him to defend. There should be a finish here, in my opinion. I feel like he should get the finish, but he allows Dean to get to his back. So we just pause it there a second. And Simon, if you want to talk to that, because you had a good point on this the other day.
Yeah, so one thing that we noticed when we was going through this is as soon as Dean feels like he's getting himself under a little bit of threat here, you can see the angle of his hips. He's trying to get his shoulders to his back. So you can sort of see the sequence from here. So Barnett's setting it up here. He's doing a really good job here setting it up. But Dean Lister's getting his first line of defence in place straight away. He's tying his hands up nicely together. And then from here, as Barnett's trying to separate and break the grip, you can already see what Lister's doing to sort of get himself set up. And then this is where the secondary defense comes in. Now, one thing I've been doing, especially when this attack gets done on me, is once I've got my grip secured, I will try and get my opposite shoulder, the one that's being attacked, back to the mat, as it sort of minimises the ability to rotate and put this submission on. And as you can see, Lister's hips are starting to go back. He's trying to get his hair. You can't really see where his shoulders are. We can start to see he's starting to fight to get his back to the mat. And as we sort of progress through this, he's slowly trying to work his way back. And as you pointed out earlier, Bon, Barnett's no longer got control of the shoulder. He's trying to talk against the elbow and the wrist and sort of lose the control of Dean Lister's shoulder here, which for me, I think was the beginning of Dean Lister's escape. As soon as he lost that shoulder, I think the submission was lost here, in my opinion. What do you want to add to that?
I agree with that, and I think something that has gone on there when Barnett's made the adjustment on trying to pin that arm from the top. Anybody looking to play this position from the top and wants to start incorporating this into the game, what you've got to realise is that you've got to keep a pinch on that body all the way through. As soon as you let your legs separate, pressure from the torso, anybody who knows what they're doing is going to try and put the back flat to the mat. As Sam said, that is the defence that you want to go for on this. It takes away any ability to produce torque. So as he's gone for that arm pin there, which is great, it gives us loads more option for attacking that arm because they've not got that secondary one to brace and defend. He's released his pressure on the torso, and that's just allowed Dean to drop his body weight through. So as soon as he's gone here to pin the leg, that opening of the thighs has allowed him to drop that through and just slowly then working his way to turning his hips back flat and mounting a really strong escape from a submission, which in my opinion should have been put away. I feel like he could have finished the match here, to be honest.
No, definitely. I agree with that there. And I think another thing about controlling the torso is one thing that we touched on it a while back, didn't we, where you want to have the head controlled as well. So if you can have the sort of the looking towards the mat or the floor, it's going to take away that ability to roll backwards as well to get the opposite shoulder back towards the mat, which if you're struggling to get the torso, having that head control can also help keep the shoulders in the air and keep that shoulder off the mat.
Yeah, another good thing about if anybody is able to get the shoulders back flat to the mat, if you've got a good control of the head, that head scissor is always there as an option as well, which works a treat if people aren't expecting it. It's a good secondary option as well. And I'm not sure whether it was on this run through where that actually ends up transpiring after this escape or not.
I think that's
or whether it was earlier on in the match. Yeah. But yeah, we can go through this and we'll just see there that Dean manages to get out from, again, what in my opinion should have been a pretty tied up finish.
Yeah.
Great defence. No question, it's great defence there. And straight back into pressure from the side. You know, there's no breathing room for Dean Lister. It's horrible. And again, we talked about this the other day. So you can see the position that's gone on here. Oftentimes, when somebody is escaping that Kimura position from the bottom, they'll be left with their arm across the body and across the neck like this. And, you know, Simon could probably talk us through a couple of nice details on how horrible that pressure is from the top when you've got your arms smeared across your neck in a side control position.
No, definitely. It's certainly not the most comfortable position, especially like I've noticed against the heavier players. Just rewind here. You can sort of see the kind of pressure that can be applied here if Barnett could get Dean Lister's back to the mat. Because like with heavier players, they've got a thicker rib cage, they've got a thicker set of shoulders. This pressure here where you're driving the elbow and the tricep across the torso, it affects the breathing, it also affects the shoulder joint. And in some instances, you can also find a submission from there as well. But like being on the receiving and the delivering end of this, it's not a pleasant position to be in. And as you can see, Dean Lister's doing a great job to sort of stay on his side and not get crushed by this position and not get flattened out here either.
No, and it's probably difficult to see from this match because Barnett's such a massive guy. You know, Dean Lister is an enormous human being.
Yeah,
I was fortunate to get a seminar from him September last year, and I remember walking into the room and just seeing the size of the guy. He's enormous. He's a hairless gorilla.
Oh yeah.
So you know, it might not be immediately obvious just from watching this match, but the pressure on a larger guy that Sam was just talking about there, this is going to be feeling uncomfortable from Dean. You can see that he doesn't want to be there. He's trying to take that pressure off straight away, because what are we with 13 minutes into this match? And for a good 10 minutes of it, at least, he's been under that side pressure of somebody who probably weighs something close to 130 kilograms. Yeah, no, not pleasant.
No, I think for anybody that's not really experienced this kind of pressure on top of you, it is absolutely physically and mentally exhausting as well. And I think that's probably part of Barnett's plan coming into this, is to sort of tire out Dean Lister for the majority of the match, and trying to sort of get submissions out of Dean Lister kind of conceding to certain positions, as opposed to trying to set them up in a fancy way. It's sort of, no, I'm going to grind you down. I'm going to grind you down until you're too fatigued to actually defend the submission.
An interesting point as well that we kind of discussed in the introduction to the podcast, but on the occasions where Dean Lister's lost, he's lost on points. And so far, he's losing on points on this match. The Metamoris isn't a points; it's a sub-only tournament, or sub-only match format, and maybe that's something that Dean Lister should have incorporated off the back of this. Is looking for more dominant positions throughout the match, rather than just looking to try and rely on leg entanglements. Although he had excellent success with that in the lead up to this match. Yeah. Maybe an interesting point to take away from guys that are, not Dean Lister. Dean Lister's an excellent grappler, but people up and coming who are becoming too focused on one particular area. Don't narrow your focus down. Have a broad spectrum of ways that you can play the game.
Oh yeah, 100%. I think I'm noticing where a lot of the up and coming players who have got a very, very strong leg lock game, once you get past their guard, having them not be able to recover guard back and start to play from side control onwards, it becomes a lot easier to sort of find the submissions. I know that I certainly don't get into leg entanglement exchanges with somebody who I know who's actively searching for it. And my passing style and the way that I play will change considerably if someone is actively looking for that leg lock entanglement.
Nice. Let's carry on through this sequence here and just have a look how this position transpires, because it is interesting to see where that top pressure occurs.
I think an interesting point here is the grip that he's got around the head as well. And he's sort of using that to sort of crowbar and try and flatten out Dean Lister. And you can sort of see the way that he's using his hips now to really manipulate the position and apply a lot more pressure to it.
Dean's still got some good frames in there, stopping those hips from coming in completely, but that's not fun.
It's not stopping that rib cage at all, is it?
No.
You can sort of see as well how uncomfortable it is from the desperation of Dean Lister trying to get out of this position. And we've sort of paused it here you can sort of see the way that Josh Barnett managed to make a escape into yet again another uncomfortable position if needed be.
Yeah, I mean, Dean Lister's famous for in many matches, if he's in a bad position, putting on a good poker face and just pretending like nothing's going on. The famous one where he's in the omoplata and he's just there pretending like nothing's going on. But for him to be actively looking for escapes with this much intensity, you've got to believe that it's a bit more uncomfortable than you might want to be.
Yeah, no, definitely. So as we sort of progressing through this now, you can sort of see the pressure, his low passing style, and constantly working and grinding down Dean Lister, sort of building up to where Barnett's trying to look for the finish now towards the end of the match. And you can sort of see the finishing sequence sort of begin before it's actually started. So we'll go to that part next, and we can sort of see how all of this has culminated into what was, for me, really, really nice finish from Josh Barnett. Okay, so as we sort of mentioned, he's piecing all the parts of the puzzle together now to really find the finish. And for me, watch this match, the finishing sequence kind of starts around this part where he's looking to pass the guard. You can also notice that he's a little bit more relaxed with everything. The way his passing style is sort of shown that he's not too fazed by the leg lock attempts. And as we sort of play through here, he starts to lead and he starts to come in. And he drops in for this pass and just goes straight past and starts using that weight and his hip pressure to really try and flatten Dean out now.
No, it was really interesting. The guys on the commentary were talking about it being a big, heavy pass. I didn't see that when I was watching this. I saw a perfectly timed pass where he was using the correct pinning of the right levers to get into a beautiful side control position. And now here, this is the point of the match where we're really looking at that beautiful setup to the finish. He's got his hips in. He's got his hips in between that frame that we were talking about earlier. So he's already in a good established side control position. He's got his arms viced together. He's got the underhook on the far leg. And what we'll start seeing as we progress through this is that he's starting to work Dean Lister's right arm, the top arm that's on the inside of his hips, up towards his body. And you guys who know what the finish is will start to see where it goes into his mind that he's going to start looking for that finish. So if we play through this, we'll see that beautiful setup that he starts to chain together here. So again, just good top pressure, but now he starts to use that hip control and starts to smear Dean Lister's arm up towards the side of his head, taking away a lot of his pressure. He's already isolated off at the armpit, and now he's just going to walk it up a bit until you see Dean Lister's arm pretty much pinned by the side of his head.
I think another interesting point here as well is you can sort of still see him looking for that Kimura on the far arm as well, as he's trying to isolate that. But just take it back a few frames here. This hip pin for me was sort of the moment he sort of knew that the finish that he chose is gonna be available to him. Being able to isolate the arm that far above the head with the scaffold readily available, it's kind of like presenting it on a bit of a plate, really. And because Dean Lister's going to be more aware of the Kimura attacks than any other attack at the moment, especially the way that he's isolating the arm again on the far side. Yeah. So, sorry, go on.
Totally agree there. I mean, with the amount of times that that Kimura has been threatened from the top, actually a really interesting point in talking about baiting your opponent into something. You know, you present them with a certain option or a certain sequence of events 4 or 5 times, and they start to build up that anticipation of, well, that's the thing that he's looking for. I've got to defend the Kimura now. And that opens up the opportunity to start going in with something else that wasn't there before and certainly wasn't expected. So, as Simon's quite rightly saying, that Kimura was being looked for at the beginning of this sequence, but now he's got that arm isolated up. There's a different option there that Dean's not seen so far in this match.
No, definitely. So, yeah, as you can sort of see now, we're getting close to this finishing sequence. And we're going to sort of play it through, and we'll pause it just before the submission starts to get applied. Talk through what he's done to get set up, and then also sort of talk through the finish once the finish has been completed. So we're going to play through the sequence. As you can see,
what we didn't see off camera there is that Dean Lister was able to recover in on this, and now we've gone into a secondary guard pass and attempt in on this. But now Barnett's already seen that option's there for a finish, and
you can sort of
gets
see
beautifully into a scaffold position. Yeah.
No, definitely, yeah. I think one thing that you can't really see that's on the camera, and well, if you can rewind it back a touch, as soon as he's past the guard, this right arm of Barnett's goes straight over, and he starts to find that far arm and starts to isolate the head. And you can sort of see with his hips here, again, it's not an obvious, I'm going to shoot underneath. It's let's just go with it and go with it and go with it. Get under the elbow. Detach the elbow from the body And once his hips are underneath, he can start to really secure the position from there. So we'll go through here. We'll just bring it a little bit further forward. And then we'll...
But there's two kind of interesting dynamics when you're in a side control position here between the game that he's been playing. The earlier attempts that were happening in the match were coming off an underhook on the far arm, where he was looking to isolate in that way. And we're only a short distance away, or a small movement away from getting the position that he's got now. So anybody kind of looking to play that side control position, just realise that being under the arm, that's going to set you up for your arm bars. When we've got the underhook, you've got your arm bars, you've got your Metamoris and all the good stuff that comes off the back of that. If we're adjusting to around the neck, if we've got that arm pinned up by the side, then that's going to lead you into your head and arm triangles and this beautiful finish that ends up happening now off the back of this sequence.
Yeah, definitely. And you can also see sort of, soon as Lister's arms through, got the head wrapped up, this knee of Barnett's shoots straight the way through, and his rib cage starts delivering an awful amount of pressure through Dean Lister, and you can almost see the panic that's kicking into him at this point. Like, I've had this submission to me plenty of time. Say Matty Klempner's probably got the best scaffold that I've experienced, or worse, depending on what aspect you're looking at it from. And
depending on whether you want your ribs broken or not.
Exactly. Yeah. And it's it's such a horrendous position to be experiencing. And you can sort of see from here the panic from Dean Lister now.
From the beginning, as soon as he gets into that position, he does not like it. It's such a horrible position to be in. But you can go through a few details on this. There's a couple of small intricacies in the setup of the position that's going to make it an uncomfortable position that's going to lead to a tap, and the difference between something that the guy on the bottom can kind of ride out. So, what's going on here? His hips are up off the floor. He's driving all of his weight down, all of that 130 kilos down into a really small section on Dean Lister's body. That's what's causing that discomfort.
Yeah, like the initial sort of reaction to this was it's a bit more of a neck crank. But anybody who's applying this or felt this applied properly will understand it's a pure diaphragm crush, and it feels like you're drowning. Like every breath you take and you exhale just gets shallower and shallower and shallower, and it's kind of set in the amount of panic. So Dean Lister's reaction here is completely understandable. And if I'm honest, if I had Barnett applying this sort of pressure to my rib cage and diaphragm, I'd probably shed a tear, to be fair.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I've been talking down a lot on Dean Lister's game during this match, and by absolutely no means do I mean any disrespect to the guy. He's one of my favourite grapplers. But what's been interesting about what Josh Barnett's been able to do in this match is just shut him down completely. And he's the bigger guy, but jiu-jitsu, sometimes we can get around that. It's just really interesting watching probably what I consider to be one of the best leg lockers be completely shut down in this match. So by no means do I mean any disrespect to Dean Lister's game, but all credit to Josh Barnett on this one.
Oh, 100%. And I think like one thing that we've not really touched on as well for the two of these is we are coming close to the end of their professional careers as well. So it was, like I said, it's good to see the way the two styles are sort of played out and the contrasting game plans kind of affected the outcome of the match. But yeah, it's been because like I said, this is not by no means a discredit to Dean Lister. Like, his credentials speak for themselves. Like, super fight champion, he's won ADCC absolutes. He had a fairly decent MMA career as well with it, didn't he?
Yep. I mean, to be honest as well, if you just look at this match in isolation, to be able to survive this onslaught for 20 minutes, that's a lot more willpower than 99.9% of people that are going to step on the mat and be able to survive.
Oh, 100%. And also, like, the weight difference between the two of them, you can see there's a considerable size difference. And it's hard to fight off someone that heavy for that constant and not get fatigued and not fall victim to this kind of submission sometimes.
And interestingly, off the back of this match as well, this isn't really a finish that a lot of jiu-jitsu guys, certainly not myself, until the first time I'd experienced it as well and talked through the intricacies of this technique. And having seen this match, I wasn't familiar with this as a submission. Neck crank, maybe, the guys that are there watching the match, the crowd, and some of the feedback immediately after the match were, it was a little bit of confusion about what had gone on here. Kind of almost looks like a reverse bulldog choke, doesn't it?
Oh yeah.
But until you feel this pressure and you have the mechanics of it explained to you, it's not a position that you see in jiu-jitsu. And I think that's where, and then Sam can talk more about this in a second, where jiu-jitsu guys can learn a lot from catch wrestling. There's a big takeaway.
Oh, 100%. Like, for anybody who's wanting a really good breakdown of this finish and how it's applied, Josh Barnett actually released a tutorial. And like I said, that's where I started to understand this submission a little bit more. And then speaking about it with my coach, Cam, and sort of playing around with the principles of it is where I just sort of developed a great understanding for this position. And I think, like you said, going back to what you said about the misunderstanding and not knowing the full ins and outs of the submission, it kind of shows with another breakdown that was done for this match, where they sort of said that he accidentally fell into this position and they were cranking it on. Those that know what I'm talking about will know the breakdown. But for me, that breakdown did this whole match a complete injustice. I'll get my words wrong again, but give this match a complete injustice and a misrepresentation of Josh Barnett's skill set and what he was looking for throughout the whole of the match. But yeah, anything else you'd like to add before we sort of close this out, one?
Yeah, just something that we probably should have touched on at the beginning of the match. Not only is Barnett got an excellent MMA record, he's known for his catch wrestling, but he's also a black belt in jiu-jitsu. Let's not forget that. Of course,
that. Yeah, no, let's not forget that either.
Yeah. So the combination of both styles, I think what I'm getting at here is don't be afraid to explore different avenues from the grappling tree. Judo, wrestling, catch wrestling, jiu-jitsu, these pieces there that, pick and choose what you want from it, but also don't be ignorant to a certain section of it, because, you might get caught out with something you were not expecting to come up against.
Oh, definitely. I'm sure Josh Barnett's been told, "Oh, you feel really strong there, mate. That's just a meathead's technique." Yeah. When in reality, it's no, he's just better than you, and he beat you.
Well, I guarantee you what didn't happen at the end of this match. Dean Lister didn't turn around and go, "Oh, that was a really good, how much do you weigh?"
Yeah.
Strong guy, aren't you?
Yeah. Like, you should focus more on technique rather than the weight training,
Yeah.
Like,
yeah. Tell me that after you tap me.
Yeah, exactly. But no, like, I think we've covered quite a lot of this match, and there's quite a lot of lessons for everyone to take away from this. And highly recommend, if you've not seen this match after watching this, going back and watching and trying to look for the points that we've sort of highlighted and pointed out. And if you've got any interest in this finish in particular, if you put in Josh Barnett scarf hold, you'll find the tutorial where he goes into a lot of detail about this.
Yeah, and just to tie up on that there today, really interesting match. As I said at the beginning of this episode, looked at it the first time I watched it with less educated eyes and didn't really enjoy the match this much. So, if you've taken some good information away from this breakdown, absolutely go back and watch the full match again, and you'll be able to see all the great things that Barnett's doing to shut everything down that Dean Lister wants to try and get off. Really interesting match for me to watch, and I enjoyed doing a breakdown on this. Also, what we'd like is you guys can give some input on any matches that you think are worthwhile breaking down and diving into a little bit more, and also give us some comments on this match as well. Any interesting points that, if you've seen the match, you want to discuss with us further, and certainly any more match suggestions, because again, like I said, this was one that I wasn't necessarily overly looking forward to as a match to go back and review, but when we actually sat down and went through it, super interesting. So any suggestions, I'm open to.
No, definitely, and I second that as well. 100% agree. But yeah, open to all sorts of feedback and suggestions for next matches. But yeah, thanks for tuning in, guys, and we'll see you next time.